All right. I don't know about you, but I've been awake for about 5 minutes, so hopefully everything is coherent and in order here. But as we were talking about before we started, these are movies we pretty much know by heart, these two, so we're probably good to go, right?
Is there a Tarantino movie you don't know by heart?
No, not really. I do have to revisit these recently. I did pull out this that I have, which is everything up to Django.
Hmm.
So yeah, and this is also the case of I talked about these way back when we did that Tarantino thing when I first started doing these videos, but I've been working quickly towards replacing all of those because like we talked about Jackie Brown recently. The next video we're doing after this one is gonna touch on that as well. You put Bastards in your top 15 of all time when we did that video.
Hmm.
So, and Pulp Fiction was in mine. So we're getting there.
We just gotta touch on Reservoir Dogs.
And Django, and I've got a Hateful Eight video from when it first came out that's pretty thorough. So that's probably taken care of.
Didn't you review it when it came out?
Yeah,
Yeah, it would have been a theatrical review, which are usually those seem to be your most in depth besides the verses.
yeah, because of course Once Upon a Time in Hollywood has its own review as well, but that also has. I got to
you
talk
talk
about it
about
throughout.
you talk about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood almost an hour.
And even after that, it came up in all the awards videos, of course, and it was my favorite movie of not just the year last year, but the decade. So, and yeah, that's still like when we did that video, I wasn't sure if that was going to stick.
Hmm.
Uh, as of the end of September, I'm still stuck by that. So, that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was the best movie of this past decade.
Man, the award season is going to be weird this year, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll hopefully get into that. We'll see. We're having trouble committing to getting the three of us together for a video, but we'll get to that. But in the meantime, let's talk about these two.
Hmm.
So I this was around the time I was getting to know Tarantino when Volume One came out. Like by the time Volume One came out on video, uh, it was like because obviously DVD was long since a thing by then, but I remember it was a VHS that we had rented, which
Hmm.
honestly kind of feels appropriate when you talk like Tarantino. So,
Hmm.
um, and then the next year, Volume Two came out, and Volume Two was the first Tarantino movie I ever saw in a theater.
Hmm.
So like I think I had just discovered Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown shortly before I saw Volume One when we rented it.
Is
Uh,
Volume One and Jackie Brown the only movies you haven't seen theatrically now that are Tarantino's?
yeah, and hopefully those days come. I would love to see Volume One in a theater.
Hmm.
That must be amazing.
Hmm. That's a missed opportunity because I think I was working at the theater when Volume One was out.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I believe the reason I wasn't rushing out to see Volume One was because this was still at a time where I would have probably been 12 when Volume One came out. Sometime in the middle of 2003. I actually don't remember. I remember 2003, but I don't remember where in the year it was.
Hmm.
But I was very squeamish, like much more than I am now.
Hmm.
Some things still bring me there, but for the most part, uh, yeah,
Well,
I was kind of scared of Volume One back then because of the things I was hearing about how over the top the blood was.
hmm.
Because I believe I didn't see a lot of it when we rented that VHS. So and it was a long time before I saw all of Volume One. Well, um, but yeah, so now that I've come to terms with how just over the top it is, there's actually still genuinely some stuff that is hard to watch in the anime sequence.
Mm-hmm.
That shit's graphic.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of the brilliant thing is the way that he kind of had to. It's half extremely artistic, half him dancing around the MPAA.
Mm-hmm.
All the different ways we see the violence, like whether it be the anime or whether at the end when it goes into black and white. Um, but yeah, so before we get into specifics, is there anything kind of in general you wanted to say about them as a whole?
It's definitely a tale of two movies. Like Volume Two's style is completely different from Volume One's.
Yeah, I remember some people were really put off by that and kind of missed the style of one, but there were others that maybe thought one was too over the top, and they much prefer two.
Mm-hmm.
But yet somehow I feel whenever I watch them together, which is usually how I watch them,
Mm-hmm.
it never really feels like a flow is broken.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that you would think there'd be a severe transition from the style of one versus the style of two, but when you're watching them together, they just kind of. It's kind of like when you have moments in movies that are usually action packed, there'll be those moments that you take to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Volume one has one of those probably when she goes to see Hanzo. It's
Mm-hmm.
probably the only breathing room the movie gets, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's almost like in like one is the entirety of that feeling, and then two is the breathing room
Mm-hmm.
until two starts to get crazy as well,
Mm-hmm.
which would be right about the time she runs into El Driver, which is very late into the movie.
Mm-hmm.
um,
I I
but it
kind of
still,
have. Go ahead.
I was say, but it still has those bursts of Tarantino, like when she like two is pretty calm until she opens the door to Bud's trailer, and then we get a very Tarantino moment.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll go more into that when we get into the specifics of them.
Yeah. I have a theory, and maybe this is because I'm running on so little sleep that I have this theory. So feel free to shoot it down if you want to. But I feel like the tone of the movies is kind of a metaphor for how people address anger. And what I mean by that is the first movie is very frenetic, very violent. It's just happened. She's very pissed off about it. Volume 2 tends to slow down a little bit until it flares back up when she gets into it. That to me is after you've initially been mad about something and had a lash out about it, you're starting to calm down and you're starting to slow your breathing. You're starting to kind of get your bearings back. And then you see something that reminds you of what happened and you fly off the handle again.
Yeah. So when you say that, the first thing I think of is how two is calm, and then there's that music cue when she whips her mask off outside Bud's trailer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like whenever she's getting ready to approach the next person, it all comes back.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if there's any weight in that theory or not, or if that's just the ramblings of a tired
It's,
dude.
it's like when the opening wedding rehearsal scene is after you get so angry and you react the entire first movie.
Mm-hmm.
And when we get to the wedding rehearsal in two, it's basically the okay, just go cool off and take some deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bud is here and it comes right back.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in the form of the now very famous thing where the music plays and there's the zoom in and everything goes red. And
Mm-hmm.
it
And
looks
then and then you could take it further by saying that lashing out again is what caused her to get in her pickle in the second one. Elle Driver's fight was essentially for survival, but once that happens, by the time she gets to Bill, she's collected a little more of herself. She's still angry, but she's got it together now.
Yeah, and it's like she's able to almost control her anger more because the what her fight with El Driver, what starts off as a fight for survival, and it's very all over the place. They're just completely tearing the fuck out of Bud's trailer,
Mm-hmm.
and it just looks like this really, almost unchoreographed thing where they're just throwing each other around. Yet the finale of that fight is like the most. It almost seems like it would have been perfectly calculated that that's how she would end the fight.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't. It may have had the whole flight itself may have been sloppy, but the ending was so like poetic in a way. And it's
Mm-hmm.
almost like it didn't have the sloppiness of I have to slice everything in sight. It was the I'm gonna do this specific thing.
Mm-hmm. I think the other thing that helps 2 slow down, though, is 2 has a lot of detours.
Yeah, you mean mainly like the flashbacks?
Yeah.
But isn't it brilliant how well the flashbacks tie in?
Yeah. It's not just like she's just standing there and then all of a sudden just has a flashback.
Yeah. And I also love the idea that it goes almost there's obviously it still kind of ties in because it's the reason she can't eat, but I like the fact that the flashback into isn't like it gives us the whole training background, which is something we had been missing up to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But the main point is to pay off how she's going to get out of the box.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the fact that it isn't just, hey, look, see, she can punch through wood, so she's going to get out of the box. And it doesn't necessarily just cut straight from that to that. It's in between, we have the scene where she has to try to eat the rice, and we see the moment that she wins Pai Mei over.
Mm-hmm.
For what seems to be the crucial moment where she wins Pai Mei over. And then we cut back to, oh, by the way, she can punch through wood, so she's getting out of the box now.
Yeah. Well, they also show it too, where her punching to get out of the box, they don't show it as just something she learned. They show it as like her ultimate triumph.
Yeah. So, do we go into the specifics of 1 and then go into 2? Because we're kind of getting into specifics of 2 as well, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, these should tie together.
I think that's what we're going to run into with this. I think with 1, we're going to be talking more about the action and the violence and everything like that, and 2 will be a more story-based conversation.
Exactly the way the movies are, pretty much.
Yeah.
I guess another thing to mention, I guess this, goes into Volume 1. The whole idea, I don't know if it's a theory or something he's confirmed. The whole idea of the 5 of them, the Deadly Viper Assassination Squad, basically being Fox Force 5,
Mm-hmm.
the show that she talks about in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Some of them are kind of loose relations, but the idea is there.
The fact that Bud's a dude is kind of a big indicator of not the.
It was Michael Madsen always sticks out so much in that shot we keep getting where they're all looking down at her after she's down.
Mm-hmm.
Like their introductory shot. But yeah, so I think another interesting thing about Volume 1 is talking about the style of it,
Mm-hmm.
about how 2 is kind of a settled down kind of thing
Mm-hmm.
versus all the hecticness of 1, is that obviously we know the order is Reservoir Dogs and then Pulp Fiction and then Jackie Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing about Jackie Brown, which I believe we talked about when we talked about Jackie Brown recently, is that some people were put off because they wanted something closer to like Pulp Fiction, and Jackie Brown is like our most sedated Tarantino. Even though the movie is absolutely Tarantino.
I would have given that nod to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood until the Manson scene.
But would you say so? He went from Pulp Fiction to Jackie Brown, which kind of threw some people off. But obviously, as we talked about, Jackie Brown is definitely getting more of recognition as time goes on.
I've always been a champion for Jackie Brown.
So you've got Jackie Brown, which is this story that people thought was basically sedated Tarantino, and it's not entirely his story because it comes from the Elmer Leonard novel,
Hmm.
Rum Punch. But would
Jackie
you
Brown's
say,
probably the one I've rewatched the second most out of all of them.
interesting?
Hmm. First is
Um,
Bastards for completionists.
would you say Tarantino followed up Jackie Brown, the movie that people hoped had been a bit more Tarantino when it came out,
Hmm.
because they wanted a Pulp Fiction follow up? Which, as we talked about, he was wise to do Jackie Brown after Pulp Fiction.
Hmm.
And what makes that even more wise is, would you argue that he followed up Jackie Brown with Kill Bill 1, with still to this day, Kill Bill 1 being the most Tarantino movie in Tarantino's filmography? Like, does it still feel like the culmination of everything Tarantino learned about movies before he started making them comes together in Kill Bill 1?
Yeah, I think his nostalgia kick kind of starts there too. Like where
Yeah,
all of his movies take place in the past because he put such a kung fu influence on these movies.
yeah, because when Once Upon a Time in Hollywood came out, it's just like you mentioned. People were saying, "Oh, the movie was, what it was for a while," and then as soon as the Manson family bursts in on Cliff Booth, the movie goes full Tarantino.
Hmm.
It's what they say. Would you say the phrase "full Tarantino" kind of is summed up in its entirety as Kill Bill 1? Is what we talk about when we talk about Tarantino at his fullest of himself.
Yeah, I would say so.
Not in the sense of full of yourself, but as you get what I mean.
Hmm.
So yeah. Uh, so is there anything you wanted to start on as far as the first movie individually?
We already were we hit the note pretty early that we aren't going in chronological order.
Yeah. Oh, you mean the fact that in the very like Oren is basically the main antagonist of the first one, and in one of the first scenes we see that she's crossed off the list already.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how much of a testament is it to how much this movie works? How Lucy Liu as Oren, maybe this is a Tarantino bias from me, of course, but Oren may be one of the best villains ever. And the fact that we start off the movie knowing she's dead already,
Hmm.
and she's like, it feels like half of the movie is build up to Oren
Hmm.
through her whole backstory and how she gains power and everything. We start off the movie knowing she's dead already.
Which is funny because once you get all that backstory about her toward the end, you're like, well, if she could beat her, she could beat any of them. Because it feels like Oren would be the toughest to defeat.
Yeah,
She's the one that has the most goons around her and is the one that has the most skill.
yeah, and there's something so
But we don't really know with Vernita Green because she had to be very, very compacted because her child was there.
yeah, and it's almost like it kind of almost was her going. Vernita Green was basically her going up against herself because she went through the whole thing of getting out and starting a family and having a child and doing that whole thing. Like Vernita Green's life is what the bride's was supposed to be.
Hmm.
So it's almost like there's like an extra grudge. So in a way, I love. I'm not sure when in his process he came to this conclusion, but I absolutely love the idea that the whole Vernita Green thing is what starts the movie. Like, it just feels like the perfect beginning to
Hmm.
this. And the fact that it had to be a conscious choice of it's going to be out of order because of this, because obviously Vernita Green is second on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And I could watch the Vernita Green scene by itself probably 100 times in one day and not get sick of it. Especially the contrast of her showing up in because we've got the black and white opening, and then we've got the opening credits, which is this silhouette where she's in the hospital. But I feel like the way the silhouette is shot almost makes it look like she's laying in an open casket until the room slowly fades in more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly we're blasted with just bright colors everywhere, like the green of the grass, the green of the house, the yellow of the pussy wagon. And everything is so bright and vibrant before this fight scene breaks out.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular setting, which feels totally out of place, but in the perfect way. So that's, I don't know how else to go into that. I love the Vernita Green scene. And isn't it, do you love the idea, because this comes back in volume 2, how do you feel about the idea of where they set up this whole idea of a fight that they would have that takes place like at midnight on a baseball diamond?
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those cases where like you love that visual, but I also love that we never get there.
We don't even make it another 5 minutes.
Yeah. Because that's one of those things. That's the kind of thing that Tarantino's known for, and we'll get into when this comes in again in this very movie. The very Tarantino thing of the action breaks out when you don't expect it to. Yes, when you know where it's going, the kaboom cereal is a dead giveaway. But
Mm-hmm.
I've got a question for you. Once again, this may be something that's confirmed, but I kind of like to, much as I like, one of the reasons I want to make movies so badly is watching a lot of Tarantino interviews, like on the Reservoir Dogs DVD when I first got it, and the Pulp Fiction DVD and stuff like that. But there's also a lot of stuff I've avoided because I kind of like taking my own direction with stuff. So I don't know. So there's some stuff where I don't know if it's confirmed or not. But despite her setup for Anita Green having a gun in a box of cereal, do you think Vernita Green is always prepared to go back to that life and that gun was always there? Or do you think that gun was put there after word spread that Oren had been killed?
I don't know. It could go either way.
Because obviously the movie ends with her saying, "Tell everybody that I'm coming."
Mm-hmm.
But I also kind of like this idea of what if it was always there anyway? Like, what if Anita Green was always prepared for shit to go down, even after coming into another life?
I mean, it makes sense.
Because as we saw in Pulp Fiction with Jimmy,
Mm-hmm.
there's always the possibility that the life is going to come back to you in some way, even if you've settled down.
Yeah.
It's like what happens to Vernita Green is the most extreme example of like
Why Jimmy didn't want to be involved.
Yeah. But yeah, because there's also that theory of like I actually think it was you that brought this theory up to me. Somebody talking about the Kill Bill movies and Bastards and Django being in-universe movies within movies. Like the Kill Bills, Bastards, and Django being movies that the characters in Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, or Jackie Brown would go see.
Yeah.
Like when Max Cherry goes to a theater in Jackie Brown, he very well could have been watching one of these.
Yeah.
But yet there's still those tie-ins where you can see his more real-world movies in his more fantastical movies. Which is perfect.
I think that theory is confirmed by what's it called? The McCluskey movie.
The 14 Fists of McCluskey.
Yes, I feel like the 14 Fists of McCluskey solidifies that theory.
Oh, and I believe with Earl McGraw being in it, From Dusk Till Dawn falls into the Kill Bill Bastards Django thing, where From Dusk Till Dawn is something else they would watch within the Tarantino universe.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's interesting is, yeah, with Earl McGraw being in this, being the one that investigates the scene at the church, or whatever you want to call it, there is Oren is not the only one in this movie whose fate is known already. Because we know that of all the stuff he goes through, like with this and Planet Terror and Death Proof, that the first time we ever saw Earl McGraw in 1995, we saw his fate. And it's so unceremonious.
Unless that's just a movie within a movie, and he was recruited to be in that movie by the local filmmakers, and he's actually like a sheriff still.
We'll go with that. Because I love the idea of Earl McGraw still being out there. Because it's really depressing when you see him interact with the others, and you're like, dude, we already know what happens to him. But appropriately, he's killed by Tarantino himself.
I love, too, that it's always Earl McGraw. Like, we don't have, like, like we talked about last week, a Curly and Duke situation.
Yeah. What do you think about, I'm kind of jumping around, but this goes back to the opening scene, actually. Even though we don't really see his face in this one, the idea of the number of people that Bill was going to be before he went to David Carradine. Because I believe Costner was in there. I know right up to the last minute it was Warren Beatty.
Which would have been my favorite choice.
I still want to know what that would have been like. Because to my understanding, the story goes, Warren Beatty was into it, but then Tarantino said, I want you to play it like David Carradine. And then Beatty said, why don't you just cast him? Which actually goes into the whole thing of the fact that it actually is David Carradine, even though I so badly would love to have seen Warren Beatty do it. Like how much of a sort of big comeback role would that have been? Because
honestly, I just want to see how Warren Beatty would have played it like David Carradine.
Yeah.
I want to know what that would have looked like.
Because when we only hear Bill at the beginning, it occurs to us their voices kind of sound alike a little bit. But the thing that I love about it actually being David Carradine is the fact that it almost feels like the whole Kill Bill saga is like the Tarantino dream project. Like where Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was his most personal movie, I feel like this was like the passion project. Like the idea, like when you're a kid, like the thing that made me get into the idea of I wanted to make movies was when I saw Return of the Jedi when I was 7. And I started making movies with action figures. I feel like the equivalent of me making movies with action figures, Tarantino was doing that only with real people with these really fantastical ideas. Yet the movie actually exists. Where like it's like, oh, I want Bill to be like this particular actor, but would that particular actor ever actually be in a movie like this? Same thing with Sonny Chiba playing Hanzo, which it's like, how amazing is it that Sonny Chiba plays Hanzo? It feels like a child that grew up with kung fu movies, making the ultimate kung fu movie in their mind but that's just what it is. It's like a fantasy type movie that never actually comes to fruition. But Kill Bill is that movie.
Hmm.
And the casting of David Carradine actually being in it feels like it plays just as much of a part in that. So I can get behind it in that sense, as badly as I've always wanted to see a Warren Beatty version.
How do you think it would have played out where we get David Carradine throughout the whole movie in 2? He's in it quite a bit. Do you think Warren Beatty might have worked better? Like, I'm not saying I can make this movie any better, but the first one where we just hear him, we don't see his face. What if the entire second movie was like that and it wasn't revealed to be Warren Beatty until she got to the hacienda at the end?
I can see that. I'd say the only reason I wouldn't want that is that I love the opening scene of 2
Mm-hmm.
as is so much.
Mm-hmm.
Because David, David Carradine is actually into so much that he actually scored a Golden Globe nomination for it.
Hmm.
And Uma got a Golden Globe nomination for both, and she got a BAFTA nomination for Volume 1,
Hmm.
which is really cool.
Yeah.
No Oscar nominations for either of these, though Sally Menke was terribly snubbed for Volume 1.
Hmm.
Like horribly, terribly snubbed for Volume 1.
Hmm.
They're both brilliantly edited, as all of the Menke Tarantino collaborations were. But yeah, this was just like on another level, editing wise.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that she never.
It's very sad knowing that she's gone. When you watch like one of the special features on Bastards is like after every cut they just wave "Hi Sally."
Yeah, and how appropriate that special feature exists since that was her last movie, wasn't
Mm-hmm.
it? So yeah, and some people say that she's. I stand by Fred Raskin. I absolutely stand by Fred Raskin. I don't know if the editing branch does, because you'll notice a Tarantino movie has not been nominated for editing since We Lost Sally, weirdly enough.
Yeah.
You'd think Django and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood would have been shoe-ins, and they missed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the editing branch misses Sally Menke that much, and if that's the case, we understand.
Mm-hmm.
But I stand by Fred Raskin as well. But
Is he the one that's done everyone since she passed?
yeah, Django, Hateful Eight, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are all him. Yeah, because he's like the assistant editor on most of the others, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So on these for sure. So it's still coming from that area. But there's another scene I wanted to talk about in regards to. I had said it's a very Tarantino moment. Right when Vernita Green is killed, when we have the gun in the box.
Mm-hmm.
It's always that's the Tarantino style, is talking, explosion
Mm-hmm.
when you least expect it. And everything about that is that the talking is just as riveting as the explosion that comes, because he hypnotizes you with his amazing dialogue and the way the actors play off each other, which makes the whatever comes so glorious and unexpected. And it's usually a gun in Tarantino movies, as it is a gun in. I'm trying to think. There are guns throughout the Kill Bill saga, but is anybody ever actually killed with a gun? I don't think so.
I
You
don't
would think
either.
with how many times we've seen the movies, you think we know that off the top of their head, but I always think like, I don't know. I mean, in the anime sequence, obviously Oren, assassinates a dude,
Mm-hmm.
but is that it?
I think the closest is when Bud shoots her with rock salt.
Yeah, I think that's the closest we get to death by gun. Because Vernita Green got close, but she should have known better. She should have aimed better if she was going to take that approach, and she obviously paid the price for it.
Mm-hmm.
So, with that in
I
mind,
don't know what it is. I was rewatching The Rock last night, and this happened in The Rock. I don't know what it is. I don't even know if you call it a movie trope. I love the missed gunshot being retorted with a throwing knife.
yeah,
I don't know why, but I just, anytime that happens, I'm like, oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Like, I don't know why, but it is.
So, with
I can't perfect it though in GoldenEye because every time like somebody shoots me, I'm like, oh, I'll do it too, and I throw it, and I just hear cling, cling, cling as it goes in the floor.
even in video game form, it's not possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, that if we're remembering correctly, apart from the anime sequence, nobody in the Kill Bill saga actually dies by gun, despite the appearance of guns occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
It's the Tarantino format of dialogue, everything's going, and then there's a blast, usually by gun, and somebody is killed. Is it not one of the most drastic examples of that? That it's pretty much the same thing, the same setup of dialogue, 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 death.
Mm-hmm.
Oren's like little boardroom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
In any other Tarantino movie, this is how you know this is Tarantino at his fullest Tarantino. In any other Tarantino movie, this scene would be Bosanaga throwing his hissy fit, and his rage gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then somebody would just blow his head off.
Mm-hmm.
He would just be shot. Probably a headshot, potentially an exploding head if we're going Hateful Eight route. But that Oren, we don't see Oren climb on the table. She's already on the table when we go back to her.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a slicing off of the head instead of a blowing off of the head.
Mm-hmm.
Does this take the Tarantino format of dialogue, 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 death to a whole other level?
I just love how she's running down the table and just people just watch.
Well, you can sense the tension. Like, they've all known he fucked it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, too, is after it happens, we get the geyser of blood out of him. Isn't it always great when we can see movie terminology being coined as we watch it? Anytime there is, I mean, you see it in, like, classic movies like this, and maybe not as over the top as this, but you can see, like, the origin of it. But anytime from 2003 onward to today, anytime a character is killed and there is a spraying or a geyser of blood everywhere, it is always referred to as like the Kill Bill effect.
Mm-hmm.
Like from now on forever, an over-the-top spraying of blood out of the body that seems completely and totally nonsensical and over the top and almost like comic book like is referred to as a Kill Bill style death.
Mm-hmm.
So it is its own term at this point. But there's also, I love being able to find like the Tarantino isms in it because it's so much more over the top than Reservoir Dogs or Pulp Fiction or Jackie Brown. Where it's stuff that not only do we recognize from other movies, but we notice them from later movies, like when the camera's just kind of going around the House of Blue Leaves after Oren gets there and has her big entrance.
It's such a calm name for a place that has such outlandish violence. I'm at the House of Blue Leaves, where everyone's dying.
But when the camera's just traveling around, does it remind you of, say, when we're getting the tour of Jackrabbit Slim's? Or later in his filmography, it reminds me of when we first get to the movie theater in Bastards at the end.
Yeah, it's definitely like Tarantino should call that the Grand Tour shot.
Yeah. Um, and
Is
so
I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've seen it. Didn't we get a shot kind of not to that extent, but kind of similar when they first get to the warehouse in Reservoir Dogs, where like we kind of explore where all the rooms are and well, the one big room and the little side areas.
yeah, we get to know the layout more than one would think.
But that also
Yeah,
might be because that's where we spend pretty much the whole movie when we're not flashing back.
yeah, it's like it's basically I, I'm sure it goes farther, but I usually associate that with haunted house movies. Usually in haunted house movies, we always get that opening scene towards the beginning where we get basically a tour of like, this is where all the important shit's gonna go down.
It's also kind of that format's used a lot in Jackie Brown when they pull the heist at the mall.
Yeah, but I like in cases where like you can also just use it as not necessarily all this stuff is where shit's gonna go down. Sometimes it's just check out this awesome set, like Jackrabbit Saloons.
Mhm. I love the use of it in Jackie Brown. I love how like the heist is told from everybody's point of view. I just think that scene's really cool.
Yeah, I feel like that's another case of you're kind of looking for the Tarantino moments in Jackie Brown,
Hmm.
and of course they're in there throughout. Like the whole buildup with Beaumont is very Tarantino, leading up to his death.
Hmm.
Um, but then suddenly when he starts fucking with the timeline, it's just like, okay, now we're here.
Hmm.
And then that takes us to one of the most Tarantino moments that Tarantino ever Tarantinoed, when Lewis shoots Melvin. That scene is comically Tarantino. And that's the thing. That's like Marvin getting shot. If you're seeing it for the first time, it comes so far out of nowhere, it's almost horrifying. But the more you get to know Tarantino's style, the more you get to know that's Tarantino probably thought that was funny as hell when he wrote it.
Yeah.
But it still works as like an effective holy shit still.
Hmm.
I still love the moment. Like the moment in Jackie Brown when Melanie gets shot still makes me like sit up every time because it's just so like we were talking about before, like around jumping on the table and cutting off Tanaka's head. There's always that Tarantino moment where just the word that comes to mind with Tarantino is escalates.
Hmm.
So
I also think of Django when he shoots Calvin Candy's sister and she just flies backwards into another room.
yeah, and the stupid shit that came out of that scene where people analyze the shit out of that.
Hmm.
And it's like, seriously, that happens in a Tarantino movie and you're analyzing the physics. Go absolutely fuck yourself. know what you're dealing with when you come in here. You don't come in
When you
Tarantino.
focus on that, you bury one of the coolest aspects of that scene where Steven's been faking a limp the whole movie, so Django shoots him in the knee, so he has to limp.
Yeah.
That's what you should take from that scene.
Man, there was when I saw Django in the theater, I don't know, the third or fourth time. I saw Django in theater 6 times. um, then one of the times I saw when Steven threw down the cane and like walked a few steps,
Mm-hmm.
the dude in front of me reacted so hard.
Oh, he did? What did he do?
Oh.
Would you watch other movies with that gentleman?
Oh yeah, every time I saw Django, there was a lot of people, and I miss that so much.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I saw that's why I kept going back to see Django in theaters. Whenever there was a lot of people in there, it was so glorious. When we saw Bastards in the theater, it was packed. Wasn't that glorious?
Mm-hmm. Didn't you say when you saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood it was packed too?
Oh my God, what a special night that was.
Well, we have officially gone off track, so let's come back.
That is true, but at the same time, I feel like with Tarantino, you never really can go off track because his movies are so together.
Yeah.
Like his filmography is such a shared, and I know this is why he wants to like do one more and quit, because he likes the idea of having this little collected filmography that doesn't have a dip in it. Despite what many people will argue, I'll be the ones that argue that his filmography only has peaks. Like their main, like, if his lowest movie is like Death Proof is still a peak in itself. Just like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Pulp Fiction, all of them might be just a little bit higher. But to me, they're all peaks. And every time I revisit the Kill Bills, I hate being asked to rank Tarantino movies. Because
Death Proof alone has the peak that, if I'm not mistaken, that's the first time that he worked with Kurt Russell.
Yeah.
And we've paid some dividends out of that. I fucking love John Ruth. John Ruth's the fucking man.
And then Randy.
Mm-hmm.
But
you still quote from to this day.
Yeah. I still drop I don't dig him. But, not to say too much, but if we're going to talk about Death Proof, we're getting a week ahead of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Spoilers.
But, yes, so where even were we? I just get, but yeah, like every time it's like I have Reservoir Dogs low on the totem pole. I'll rewatch Reservoir Dogs and be like, why do I always have this so low when I rank him? But the problem is that happens with every movie. So it's just impossible. I know
it's easy to do that with Reservoir Dogs because you're like, oh, it's his first. It's got to be his weakest. You watch it, you're like, nope, this is great too.
Yeah, I've got my top 3 Tarantino. We have Pulp Fiction, Once Upon a Hollywood, Django, are like all right here together.
Mm-hmm.
Then the rest are just interchangeable amazingness.
Mm.
And I love having the epiphany again every time I watch the Kill Bills.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, the Kill Bills are such a special experience. And it's a full one between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that even when it gets, like, when I watch Volume 1 feels half an hour long.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, and 20 minutes of it feels like when she's getting her sword.
Yeah. And even that goes by quicker every time.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously once she gets to the House of Blue Leaves, it's just a massacre. How do you feel about the massacre at the House of Blue Leaves as a whole?
I mean, it had to be filmed in silhouette, so.
I love how just when you think it can't get more over the top, something more over the top happens. Like, it's like she pulls the guy's eye out, which is foreshadowing in a number of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like you go back to, that's what Pai Mei did to Elle Driver. But then you go back to that and you're like, even once you get more information, you're like, oh, she learned that from Pai Mei, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
In the same scene, she's fighting Gordon Liu as a different character.
Mm. I do like Gordon Liu as Pai Mei, though. I'm kind of glad that Tarantino decided not to play Pai Mei.
Yeah, I will defend every time Tarantino has acted in one of his movies. But yeah, Pai Mei is, I feel like, maybe too crucial of a role for him to come in and have a little fun. I do like even though there's the interesting thing of, because a lot of people are confused when you go to Django and you see James Remar playing 2 different parts. And I feel like those people forget that both Gordon Liu and Michael Parks have 2 separate roles in Volume 1 and Volume 2 as well.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason that may be. I'm not sure. But yeah, it never really occurred to me in the moment when I first saw the movies that Johnny Mo and Pai Mei are the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Parks is a little more obvious, but Johnny Mo had a mask to be behind, and Pai Mei has the over-the-top hair and all that.
Mm-hmm. I just think if Tarantino would have done it, it would have felt more like he was like parodying, like that kind of character. I know that wouldn't have been his intention, but that's how it would have come across.
Yeah, because there's a lot of peak Pai Mei moments. That scene when they're first like dueling and he jumps onto the sword. that shit never gets old. That's every moment in every Tarantino movie. That shit never gets old. Well, the thing I was gonna say was particularly during the Crazy 88 scene, just when you think it can't get more over the top. Like with the wire work, and you've got the eyes snatching, you've got fighting go-go and all that stuff. Sometimes you have stuff that goes as over the top as possible, but just in the blink of an eye. Like when she slices the dude in half, just goes by.
Well, let's
like,
not forget.
like it's no big deal.
Let's not forget the last fight in that scene against Oren is a very, very toned down thing. It's very slow, but let's not forget it ends in a scalping.
Which, once again, you can almost say is maybe foreshadowing in the Tarantino universe.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we do to villains in Tarantino sports. So,
Oren must have been a Nazi sympathizer or something.
how much do you love that moment? I like to call it Tarantino's Wizard of Oz moment. When she's fighting everybody off, and then she goes to fight Oren, and she opens the doors, and that little outdoor area where she fights Oren is almost like she's stepping into an entirely different world.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god, that is.
I now know why you call it the Wizard of Oz moment.
Yeah, it does. Does that not kind of get? But that's the thing is, even though it's Dorothy stepping from sepia into full-on color, just the way the whole visual changes gives you that same vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, God, it's art. that's the best I can do. It leaves me practically speechless. Oh my god. And then yeah, just that whole fight scene. I've made it abundantly clear on this channel many times. If you want to draw me in, just put fucking Snow in the scene, and I am there. Snow looks so good on camera every time.
That's why you were excited about The Dark Knight Rises.
Yeah, Snow during the day works for me, but good God, the set is so beautiful where she fights Oren. It almost doesn't even look real. It's and I love the thing, the little water thing that kind of sets the tension. And it's like I'm just here doing my thing, and they can attack whenever they want to. It almost feels like a timer of sorts on when they're gonna go after each other.
I just feel like the little wooden thing is just there, like, don't mind me, just doing my job.
It's like, oh, sword fighting. This is new in this setting.
Welcome to the column of oh god, a scalping.
Yeah, just the contrast of everything on that white background. I remember when I watched Gangs of New York with Dad,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the opening scene when we first meet Bill the Butcher, and it's also we know a battle is forming, and it's like all snow.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad just immediately turned to me and he's like, "So the blood's more visible."
I mean, he's not wrong.
It's like just the contrast of that, like I mean, yeah, we got a full scalp, but mainly there's like the red little splatter when the slice on Oren first happens, or there's also the blood on Oren's like leg, just
Mm-hmm.
that red on white contrast of shit's getting real.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say apart from Bill? I mean, obviously the fight with El Driver is wicked.
Mm-hmm.
And Vernita Green gets to fire a shot off, but still, apart from Bill, would you say easily Oren is the closest that the bride came to being killed?
Probably.
And there's like it feels like there's real stakes where she gets that slice in the back that actually takes her down. It does feel like that's what's so amazing about these movies too, and the whole thing is the fact that even though Oren is first on the list, she feels like a final boss, which
Yeah.
makes the timeline of Volume 1 perfect. You look like a thought is brewing. Were you
I mean,
conjuring?
it is kind of weird. It's like starting the game off fighting the most difficult boss.
Yeah, because it's. I love
Which
the.
I played a game like that. It was Arkham Origins. The game starts with Deathstroke, and every other boss after that's easy.
Though I do love I love the order of the list, where it's like Oren is a huge deal, and she's kind of hard to get to. I know that's an understatement, but she's kind of hard to get to.
She's only the most well protected of all of them.
So it's like we're doing the big thing to start off with,
Mm-hmm.
but then it's like Vernita Green seems like no big deal, even though that fight is a spectacle in itself. And then Bud is well. The thing is we learned that Bud is much more of a threat than he sets himself up to be when she gets to his trailer in Volume 2. But it does feel like that in a different way, Elle Driver is almost on the level of Oren as far as how deadly she is.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Elle Driver was absolutely going to get the kill before Bill was like, that would be beneath us to kill in our sleep. Like, we're better than that. She's better than that, and we're better than
Yeah.
that. So it's almost like we have a boss level with Oren, and then there's the two in the middle who are worthy adversaries, but not as much as Oren. But then Elle Driver is another one where it's like you almost get like a rivalry sense,
Mm-hmm.
where like Elle Driver will be the boss level in a different story.
And it's funny too because Elle Driver is so pissed off that Bud almost pulls it off because she wants to do it herself.
Yeah.
She's so pissed.
To the point that she takes him out. That's the thing too, is that the fact that Elle Driver becomes the loose cannon of the five,
Mm-hmm.
And takes matters into her own hands, makes her as much of a threat. Like if there's one that starts taking out other people on the list, that one's probably pretty threatening.
Yeah.
So that's a great way to kind of go into our actual final boss, of course. Literally. He's the boss of everybody.
Man, when Bud died, he had so much joy in his life before that snake showed up. He thought he'd won the whole thing. He had a big briefcase of money in front of him. He was drinking. He was like in his happy place.
But the thing about that is he was in total fuck my life mode right before it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had no money.
Lost his job.
Yeah, he went into work, and Sid Haig is there. Is this our transition into Volume 2?
Yeah.
This is what makes it so great. It's so seamless. We just go right into 2. So he goes in, and I love this exchange between him and Sid Haig, where Sid Haig feels very much in Captain Spaulding mode here. And House of a Thousand Corpses in particular, when he's behind the counter. And I love his delivery of, they're talking about Larry, Bud's boss.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear Larry's voice from the back say, "Is that Bud? Tell him to get his fucking ass back here." And Sid Haig's delivery of Larry would like a word with you. Then he goes back there, and he's fired by Larry. Larry goes all in on hating Bud's hat, his shit kicker hat, as he calls it, a term I know you love so much. And then there's a little ray of hope. It's like, well, you've just been fired, but go see Rocket. She's in the main room, and she's got a job for you. He goes in there, and she's like, yeah, the toilet's clogged and there's shitty water everywhere. Could you take care of that, even though you don't work here anymore? So he's got to clean up shitty water without pay, and then go home to his shitty trailer. When he goes to his trailer after a day of being out, it's like Bud is obviously the deadbeat Cliff Booth. Like when you watch when you watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and you see Cliff Booth after a long day drive back to
That'd
his
be Cliff Booth. And you just said that so casually.
well, when you watch Cliff Booth after a day of wandering around the city, just go back to his trailer. You want to be Cliff Booth.
Eating his mac and cheese.
Yeah, and he's just living his life. He's got Brandy there. Fucking nobody wants to be Bud. Who wants to be Bud? And then that's the thing is, his life is finally reaching a corner until a snake appears. How appropriate is it that he was going to get taken out by Black Mamba regardless? I love the way as she's leaving, after she's plucked out L Driver's eye, the snake is just there, like hisses at her, but it's almost like one Black Mamba acknowledging a fellow Black Mamba.
What would L have done if Bud would have opened the suitcase and was like, "Okay, cool, I'm gonna go to the bank," and then just took off? What if Bud would have taken that shit to the bank? We'd have had a whole other movie.
I just have this very comical image of, first off, it's a comical image in itself of Bud at the bank. Let alone, like, take the snake out of the scenario for a second.
No, there's one key thing you're missing. He goes in there dressed exactly as he is.
And then he's still, he does
now I just want to put Bud in different places. Like, imagine how out of place Bud would look if he was at the House of Blue Leaves.
He takes when he goes to the bank, he pulls the Rick Dalton and takes the margaritas to go and just takes the blender. Oh my god. Where were we? Oh, the Buds.
We went on a fun detour. That's the kind of detour you live for when we do these videos.
Well, yeah, just the idea of Bud. That's funny on itself. Now, just this image of Bud at the bank accidentally unleashing a snake.
Is it kind of like what I did with my name today, where it was funny and then we went to another level?
Yeah, that's confusing to the people to hear that, but it makes sense to us. But but yeah, the whole Bud sequence. So as we talk about how bumbling Bud comes off, but I love how worthy of an adversary Bud ends up being, because we talked about Oren being the closest to the bride being killed, because it's actually during a fight. Like, the bride was always going to have a way out because of what she learned. Like, putting her in front of Wood was probably not the best idea, Bud. But damn, was it a worthy effort? Like, everybody,
it's funny, like Bud is the laziest. Bud is the deadbeat of the group, but his solution was also the most cruel.
L Driver, of all people, was like, damn, that's fucked up. Oh, big question. Do we have a connection to Django here? This is another one where it's I've never really looked into it.
Oh, it's one of those universe theories because Paula Schultz.
Yeah, because Django begins in Texas in 1858. I've never been able to get a clear look at the dates on the Paula Schultz tombstone. Even on the Blu-ray, I can't get much of a grasp. It in some angles it looks like 1853.
I think it's 18 something.
Because I feel like the theory I think that I heard is that maybe it was like King Schultz was just a dentist, and then something happened to a potential wife, Paula Schultz, which ended up leading to his bounty hunting career. But I can't tell if the date is pre-1858 or not.
18 something.
It almost makes too much sense. They're even in Texas. It makes too much sense. But yeah, that whole scene though, where we get the burial from the inside, when we just hear the dirt, and the sound of the dirt gets farther and farther away, is so terrifying. And I also love the scene before that where the aspect ratio changes when she's in the back of Bud's truck to show how confined she is.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like it's foreshadowing to what's literally about to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's a terrifying scene. Wait, like, props, Bud.
Bud barely had to lift a finger.
And like we said at the beginning, he was waiting for her the whole time. Like, it's like, Bud comes off like an idiot. Bud comes off like a deadbeat. Bud just got fired from a strip joint. Bud is worthless. And then she opens the door and gets blown away.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, Bud is not fucking around.
Now, if that was a real gun, it would have been over.
Yeah.
Like, roll credits.
Yeah, and it's like, when you think of him as Bill's brother, you think, oh, they couldn't be more different. But it's like, their levels of sadism are pretty close.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, the first line of Volume 1 is Bill saying, do you find me sadistic? Yeah, your whole family's pretty fucked.
I feel like Bud's over there somewhere in the corner smoking a cigarette, being like, he thinks he's sadistic.
It's like, if push comes to shove, if this doesn't go well, I've got a wooden box ready. I'll hold on to
That's
it
just it.
for about 40
This
years.
plan is so elaborate, Bud's had to have this in place. Like, did he call his little short friend and was like, it's a go?
Do we know where Paula Schultz's coffin went?
It was just sitting there.
Yeah, did he, like, take it?
I don't know.
I would say, if he had put it on top of her, she may not have been able to get out.
Yeah.
Well, as many props as we can give him, Bud's still fucked up, it turns out. You were so close, Bud. You had a little bit of integrity there.
There's so many simple fixes that would have made Bud's plan work. If he would have bound her hands behind her instead of in front of her, it would have worked. Like, Bud was right there. Maybe he fucked up because of the stress of losing his job. Maybe that's why he half-assed it.
He looked really broken to lose that job. Props to Michael Madsen, by the way. We haven't really given props yet. Do you consider the guy that helped him dig the hole a loose end?
What did ever happen to him?
Yeah, like, who is that guy?
Like, is he going to go to visit Bud one day and be like, oh, shit?
I almost feel like I feel like there should have been a scene where he was still there in the cemetery doing some other task when she came out.
Maybe he works there. Maybe that's how they got access.
Yeah, we'll say there's an off-screen moment between her going to, like, that diner and her busting out that he was taking care of. So, yeah.
All you agree is just going to be her trying to find Bud's little short friend, and it turns out he's the hardest person to find.
Yeah. Remind me, and before we finish here, we'll come back to the prospects of this potential 3 that keeps getting brought up occasionally. I'm thinking, my mind kind of got lost because there were some things I was remembering that we kind of didn't really touch on in the first one, like the whole Michael Bowen thing and Jonathan Loughran, where we take one of Robert Englund's lines from Eaten Alive, the Toby Hooper movie. Were you aware of that? That's where the "My name's Buck and I'm here the fuck" line comes from.
No.
Yeah, Robert Englund said that. It's like the first line of Eaten Alive.
Huh.
And that's a pretty twisted thing to go into as like a side thing in the first movie. Like, oh, by the way, that was happening in this 4 years. Was Michael Bowen taking a totally different turn from the otherwise good guy he played in Jackie Brown?
Yeah.
But then he went on, but then he would go on to do Uncle Jack and Breaking Bad, which is about as bad as it gets. So you were talking about Nazis earlier. That's yeah, Michael Bowen came full circle.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that pretty much the Bud sequence.
Yeah.
I do love. What do you think about the idea of them not revealing her name until L Driver says it in that moment?
I don't know. That's one of those things that I never really understood why that happened.
Once again, I haven't really looked into the confirmation. It's weird. You think I would have read every single thing about every Tarantino movie, but I kind of just like having like being able to take your own thing. But I'm going to assume it's a case of in the first movie and in the first part of the sequel, we've got her basically as like the bride is just a killing machine.
Hmm.
Like there's hardly anything human about her because she has to put that aside because she must kill. Like that's why she tries to ignore the fact that Vernita Green's daughter is present as much as she can because this is her in killing machine mode.
Hmm.
And then it's more we're getting closer and closer to getting more to her human side when her actual name is finally revealed.
She even calls Vernita Green out for being a bitch for even like trying to pull her daughter into it.
Yeah, that was such a desperate move on her part. Yeah, you could say.
Hmm.
But I also love the idea of like the classroom thing is how
Hmm.
they confirm that's what her name is. Just fun shit like that is why we love Tarantino as well. But yeah, so okay, now that we've touched on Bud in his entirety, I want to go back to the scene I already praised before, but to kind of explain a bit more why. The wedding rehearsal scene, which is the opening scene of Volume 2. The thing that I love about this scene is we were talking about how this is basically the ultimate dream project of Tarantino's. And you get that sense of like it's almost like a child at play when we see the action in Volume 1. You can sense his giddiness as the bride is slicing everybody up. But in a totally different way, I also get that vibe from the dialogue in this wedding rehearsal scene, particularly when she goes outside and Bill's there and they start talking. Even though it's just this is like peak Tarantino as well. It's just two characters speaking to each other very calmly. Two characters with a lot of history, I guess you could say, to put it
Hmm.
mildly. But it's like you get a sense of excitement of Tarantino writing these two particular characters talking to each other. There's something about the dialogue that is so engrossing. You can almost feel Tarantino's excitement as he was just writing two characters talking calmly to each other. Like it's hard to explain, but do you get what I'm talking about?
Yeah, and it's a contrast of in the first one, whenever something went black and white, there was so much violence. And this time, the black and white is just calming.
Yeah, yet at the same time, because it's the black and white, we know what it's leading us to.
Yeah.
You know, it's leading us to that opening shot of Volume 1,
Hmm.
and we're coming full circle to that. How amazing is that the opening scenes of both movies are in the discounting the scene in the car in Volume 2 when by that point in the timeline she's on her way to Bill specifically,
Yeah.
but taking the more or less opening scenes of both movies, and it's the first one starts with the aftermath of the first scene of the sequel. It's so I love these timelines. Like I feel like because there was the whole what was it going to be called, the whole bloody affair where they kept teasing this idea of releasing the movies again only together.
Yeah, in one piece.
I felt like I had heard possibly that would have put them in chronological order.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's anything to that, but I mean, I feel like it would, especially if you know the movies well, it would just be interesting to see it in chronological order. I think I even did that once, just skipping around the chapters on the DVDs forever ago, like around
Mm-hmm.
the time they first came out on DVD. Um, but I don't know, I just love the way the timelines work here. Like I said, especially when they come together, like um, going back to her training with Paime while she's in the box. And just that whole sequence in general. I love the moment when she's doing the training to punch through the wall, and there's just that one little shot where she punches the wall in her sleep.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that's like I said, it's hard to just kind of talk about these movies coherently. You just kind of have to jump around the way the movie does,
Mm-hmm.
the way the movies do, whatever you want to call them. I mean, they're one. He considers them one when he counts his movies, so you know.
Yeah.
Is there anything else about Volume 2 before we get to the Bill scenes at the end?
We didn't really talk about the fight with Elle.
Yeah.
Fight itself. And the fact that it's in such a confined space, and Bud's shitty trailer becomes even shittier.
Yeah. Worth noting, shock surprise, but as if this is very prestigious, but I mean, it's the biggest award show with that category. Both of these movies won the MTV Movie Award for Best Fight. Her and Elle Driver won for Volume 2, and Her and Go-Go won for Volume 1. So there you go.
Fun fact.
But yeah, I think that's the way it is. Like, just how vicious that fight is.
That fight is more like Volume 1 than the rest of the movie is.
Yeah. Which is great because it's almost like, I mean, obviously there's just history in full, but it does feel like the payoff to the scene where Elle Driver almost kills her in her sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that, as we see with the scene where she literally kills Bud because she's pissed that she didn't kill, that she supposedly died by his hand, and that's just unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And that out of nowhere she realizes she gets her chance. Like, holy shit. Even though I have now been kicked into the wall, like, while she's making impact with the wall, it's occurring to her, oh shit, I've still got my chance. And then it unleashes. I love another one.
It's kind of like the scene in the first Spider-Man when the glider's flying at Willem, and it's just that cut of him going, oh, right before it gets him.
But the thing here also is when I was talking about those particular moments. Like, it's a whole fight scene and it's great, but every now and then the best fight scenes have those little moments that stand out on their own. Like Paime jumping up onto the sword.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about you, but one moment that will never get old is when Elle does like that flying kick towards her that's really super dramatic, and she just grabs her by the leg and flings her through the wall.
Yeah.
Just the moments like that really make those moments stand out. And then, like I was talking about before, where it's the ultimate standoff between the two of them. The music from the opening scene of 2 comes back, and they charge at each other. And this fight has such, despite the sloppiness and the all over the place of it, the end of this fight has such a calculated conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
Just the perfect fuck you conclusion.
That and it's like the sadism of what happened to her before kicked in, because she was like, I'm not even going to finish her off. She could just wander around that trailer with no eyes.
Yeah, because there's obviously, up to and including the end credits, there's the question of, is Elle taken care of or not?
Yeah, because the snake's still there, too.
The snake's still there, she's in the middle of the desert, and she's bleeding out of her head. I mean, I feel like if...
And there's a dead body Bud there, which is going to attract vultures. What? It will.
Okay, number one, he's indoors. But secondly, let's run with that. As if Bud's life wasn't any worse in this movie. That would be something that would happen to him. He would be the kind of person that gets attacked by vultures indoors after he's dead. Okay, so I feel like all signs point to L Driver's taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
But I would imagine, if, like I said, I want to touch more on this towards the end, but while we're here, I would think if he goes through with Volume 3, which, like I said, seems to continuously come up, and it almost seems like, oh, he might actually do it, and then it disappears again.
Mm-hmm.
If he does end up going through with it, it's probably inevitable she comes back, isn't it?
I would guess.
I mean, if they're gonna intentionally leave it open with the question mark during the end credits, if he makes, like, it's really in this place where I feel like it's inevitable she would come back if there was a 3, but if she didn't, I think there's enough closure in she's bleeding out, she's in the middle of the desert and blind, and the Black Mama's roaming around.
Mm-hmm. And the vultures are circling.
So, you can almost maybe possibly say that interaction between her and the snake before she walks out the door is basically like it's like I was talking
The snake is essentially saying, "Let me finish my cigarette, and then I'll go take care of it."
It took so much pleasure in ending Bud's misery that it needed a break.
Not only that, but it took Bud's fucking cigarettes and smoked them.
You gotta take the man's cigarettes too.
Oh man.
Oh. Okay, so does this bring us to the finale?
Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't touch on?
I don't believe so.
That's crucial enough to touch on.
I don't believe so.
Okay, so what do you think about the last? God, it's probably the last half hour, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
When she gets to Bud's place, or fucking Christ, Bill's place. No, God forbid we spend any more time in Bud's place.
It's essentially like, from the time she gets there, it's essentially Bill going on the longest monologue in history.
While we're on the topic of Michael Parks being in this movie, I think Michael Parks and Red State may have it beat. But we're in that vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
So, because isn't Esteban in a wheelchair?
I don't know.
Much like Michael Parks is for a large portion of Tusk. So there's that.
Ah.
And of course, Tarantino and
Kevin Fuel of the film.
Yeah, because Tarantino and Kevin Smith were in like that same era.
Mm-hmm.
And know each other well. There's that special feature I love watching on the Clerks 2 DVD, where when Kevin Smith finished Clerks, the first thing he did was show it to Tarantino and Rodriguez at Rodriguez's house. And the ensuing conversation is a special feature on the Clerks 2 DVD, and it's amazing. They're just hanging out at Rodriguez's house, talking about Clerks 2 after it was screened for them. You'll notice Rodriguez did the music for Volume 2.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and Rodriguez is thanked in the credits both times as my brother, I think he calls him. So, which would go into the next Tarantino outing. But before we get there, do you find it interesting that Bill's superhero speech?
Mm-hmm.
I remember being a big deal at the time. Like, a lot of people found it very profound at the time. I mean, I'm sure it was a common theme in comics for a long time, even prior to that, but all the superhero movies that came out post Kill Bill 2 really seem to embrace the the theme that Bill is talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
When you say,
Yeah, I would say so.
how do you feel? This might seem like a random question, but I'm curious. Oh, worth noting. Now that BB's here, it took me a long time to figure out that BB is the same actress as the girl that gives Cliff Booth the acid cigarette.
Mm.
So she's still around.
Hmm.
um, how do you feel in the little bit we see of Bill as a father?
It seems like he's a pretty good one.
I love how almost subtly disturbing it is.
Mm-hmm.
Because he plays little games with her, playing possum and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Cuts the crust off of her sandwiches. And he speaks in that very fatherly tone. Like he's almost like
He
he's old.
uses a big ass fucking knife for that job.
Yes,
I don't
as
have knives that big, and he's using it to cut up a fucking cold cut.
yeah, only 4 years later, Walter White would do the same thing in the first season of Breaking Bad.
Maybe I've been making my sandwiches wrong all this time. Maybe I need to go out and buy like a fucking machete to make my ham and cheese.
So, comments like that. I'm trying to I've got this imagery in my head while trying to conjure this thought. So,
My bad.
and there's, but Bill is old enough to where he comes off fatherly, but also very grandfatherly.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, the stuff that he talks about with her in this tone, to where he'll talk about like anything like child friendly in the same tone he talks about you murdered your goldfish not realizing what would happen, and then it's almost practically a bedtime story when he just straight up explains to her that he shot her mom.
Mm-hmm.
He just says it so calmly like it's any other story. And there's like such an underlying thing here where when she's explaining why she left, and it's the whole thing of I didn't want her in this life. I didn't want this being normal for her. And he kind of beat her to it, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
She watches movies like Shogun Assassin to fall asleep to. Which of course that could be any kid. Like we watched some interesting things growing up, probably around BB's age.
That's not to mention that she's learning all of this for the first time. She didn't even know that her child was still alive, let alone that Bill had gotten a hold of her and was already starting to move her toward that way of thinking.
Yeah, that's where the master storytelling comes in. How much of an emotional journey this whole last third of Kill Bill 2 is.
Mm-hmm.
But once again, much like the transition from the frenetic nature of 1 to the more calm nature of 2 for a while, it's a drastic change in tone, yet it never like goes off of its balance.
Mm-hmm.
Like it goes so smoothly into all these really different sections and feels and emotions and stuff like that. And it's like I will never be totally sure how he managed the tone of this, the whole thing from the beginning of 1 to the end of 2. And how we eventually come full circle to a genuinely emotional ending. And the whole thing of how it's actually almost like they build it up like this massive, massive revenge movie, and it's like when she gets to Bill, she's gonna kill him the fucking hardest. Yet it like there's a sense of heartbreak when she has to kill him.
Literally and metaphorically.
Yeah. She literally, that's the whole when he puts her in the box and he says, "This is for breaking my brother's heart." Little did Bud know. um to the point that one of the like the very last scene of the movie is her like on the ground of the bathroom crying. And there's so many things she's saying thank you repeatedly, where it's like, it's thank you, this is over, thank God baby's alive, thank God I have baby now. But also like there almost seems to be genuine crying, like the heart, like it could be the heartbreak of having to have killed Bill, the heartbreak of everybody that died in her fake life at the wedding rehearsal. Just all these things come together because a lot of
The fact that she just was a part of the death of so many people that were like coworkers at one point.
and had nothing to do with her previous life.
Mm-hmm.
They were just bystanders to what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
And any other revenge movie of this style would focus on the person becoming a killing machine, but it's almost like the whole point of the story is for her to come back full circle to being a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And because usually in stories like this, you don't really think to, like, all this stuff happens, but there's so much focus on the revenge angle that other movies and stories like this don't take the time to say, imagine how all this must weigh on the character after the fact.
Yeah.
Like everything that's happened.
Yeah, we don't see John McClane dealing with the fact later in the night that he just killed 20 people in one night.
Yeah. And and just like to have all of that culminate in just this one scene where she cries in the bathroom, and to have Uma go through all the different emotions in this one moment, is enough. Actually ends up being enough to sum up everything that happens in both movies. And it doesn't even last that long. It's crazy, but it works. And once again, we get another thing of the fight that would never be, like the baseball diamond. When Bill says, there's a beach nearby, and in the moonlight, it's, the perfect place to fight to the death. It's like, we never get there again.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way he can conjure this imagery to where we can imagine these fights taking place in another universe when the fights actually go down much more quickly. It's almost like a combination of the fantastical and the grounded. We can make this something really over the top and say the way you fought O-Ren, or it could just be, we're two trained killers. This is going to happen quickly. whatever the outcome is. So, yeah. So, is that it for 2?
I think so.
All right. So,
do you remember seeing, though, when it came out, like, a lot of people that were disappointed that Bill's death wasn't more over the top?
Yeah, but I mean, would you change it?
No, I can't really think of a way that it would have been any better without being too cartoony or ruining the message of the movie.
Yeah, because it's also an ultimate payoff in itself that he's the reason she got in to be Pai Mei's student. Like, apparently it was a fight to get her accepted. In that he was like, maybe like the ultimate student or whatever. He was a student of Hanzo, he was a student of Pai Mei, he was a student of fucking everybody. Like they were talking about with Esteban, he has all these different father figures, all these things. And she killed him with a move that even he wasn't good enough to learn.
Well, not only that, but, she he broke her heart by destroying her chance at a new life, so she broke his, destroying his chance at his new life of being a dad.
Yeah. And as you pointed out, in the very literal sense as well.
Mm-hmm. Which, at the end of the day, that's the most Tarantino thing ever. Like, I metaphorically broke your heart. Well, I'm going to literally break yours.
See, when you say that to somebody, they might picture Dumb and Dumber.
Mm-hmm.
Literally ripping his heart out of his chest. But no, done in just the perfect way. So now I said we would end on the prospects of 3. Obviously, I trust Tarantino no matter what. I've really never been big on the idea of there being a 3.
I think it should be. I think if he wants to stop making movies, he wants the next one to be his last, right? What I
Suppose
think he should do if he's going to do a third one, instead of making a movie, I think he should make his movie that he's going to make to end everything out. And then I think he should get with maybe like Marvel or something and do it as a graphic novel.
because he did say when he supposedly finishes with movies, he wants to go into more of like novels and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Novels and TV and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But first off, I feel like because I've heard a number of theories on what would happen in 3. I have heard that the whole story would be because I mean it is one thing where we reach a perfect ending, and like I said, the bride gets to come full circle and find that life again
Mm-hmm.
that she lost. Only it's with her actual daughter now, which is really the perfect ending.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also the idea of revenge never ends. It's always going to be a constant cycle.
The one that I've always heard as a theory is that it would start with Vernita Green's daughter killing the bride, and then BB would go on the revenge quest.
I've heard that one, and I've heard that it would still be the bride, and because the whole idea would be to keep BB out of it. If she's doing it, it'd be so cliche. But I'm sure Tarantino could do it in a very Tarantino way. While trying to keep BB out of going that route, she remains the protagonist, and Vernita Green's daughter is just the main antagonist of the movie.
I've heard theories that Vernita Green's daughter is trained by a totally blind Elle driver, different stuff like that.
And that's what I was talking about, where it's, if there was a third one, it has to be, there's no way Elle Driver doesn't come back if there is a third.
Mm. So. I think if they do a third one, I think they need to do it in the style of Volume 1.
Yeah, kind of going back into the full circle area as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing too. Is like I can say all day, like if Tarantino made it, I'm sure it would be a masterpiece. But on sight unseen, unmade, I don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a. But like I said, if he made it,
you're like, damn it, you're like Farvo with dip size in his drink. I don't want it.
But it's I don't want a large Farva in this scenario. So, but like I said, if he made it, he'd make it with a purpose, and he'd make it to where it was perfect. I am sure. I don't doubt it, but I would prefer if that was it. So, but yeah, and obviously he's still in touch with the actress that played Baby because she's in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So, if we were to go that route, there's an open door already. But yeah,
are him and Uma on good terms?
I think so. I think that thing that went wrong was more of a Weinstein problem.
Mm.
Because I heard that the story I heard was that she forgave Quentin for that pretty early,
Mm-hmm.
and it was more of a like the the background people were the ones that really fucked that up, is what I heard. So
Mm.
yeah, and of course they just it wasn't too long ago they reunited when they played Pulp Fiction at Cannes again. So yeah, so is that pretty much it?
I think so.
Do you want or not want like strongly a volume 3?
I'd watch it if it came out, but it's not totally necessary. I'd rather him go back and do something like Pulp Fiction or Reservoir Dogs again.
All right, so we've pretty much already spilled.
I feel like with his tendency to play with timelines, I feel like there's an alternate universe out there where Tarantino did Memento.
Yeah. So we've already pretty much spilled what our next video is going to be, because we're going to be in October when we do our next video, where everything.
It's Nudie Magazine Day.
Yeah. Killer reference. um, it's where everything is going to be horror themed for like every day of October. So you're going to get real fucking sick of seeing my face in October if you stick around. But yeah, so, and we have already come up with all the ones we're going to do throughout October. We have 5 of these planned because there's 5 Saturdays in October. So yeah, and we already know what those are, and I have a whole sort of calendar on what October is going to be video wise. So all of that will be coming in a few days. So I also have a couple of review videos that'll probably be going up pretty much around the same time this does. So either this will come before those or in the middle of those. But you already know the answer to that as you're seeing this, so it doesn't matter. So do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's it.
All right, then I guess we'll end here.